The Galactic Council chamber was a marvel of architectural pretension, all gleaming crystal spires and floating platforms arranged in perfect geometric harmony. It was the kind of place that screamed, "We're so advanced we don't even need chairs that touch the floor," to anyone unfortunate enough to visit. And today that unfortunate visitor was humanity. Ambassador Zorglex of the reptilian hegemony was having the time of his scaled life. His serpentine form coiled elegantly around his floating platform as he gestured toward the holographic display showing Earth's pathetic application for galactic membership. "Honored colleagues," he hissed with barely contained amusement, "I present to you the latest comedy from the Outer Rim. The humans of Sol 3 believe they're ready to join civilized society." A wave of chittering, buzzing and various other alien expressions of mirth rippled through the chamber. Council leader Vorthak, an ancient being whose crystalline form had witnessed the rise and fall of 1,000 species, resonated with what passed for laughter among his kind. "Oh, this should be entertaining. What's their most advanced technology, Zorglex? Have they discovered fire yet?" "Better than that, your luminescence," Zorglex replied, his forked tongue flicking out in delight. "They've mastered the art of controlled explosions for propulsion." "Yes, you heard correctly. They strap themselves to bombs and light the fuses." Engineer Blixnorp, whose species had evolved beyond the need for humor but apparently not beyond the need for condescension, activated his translation matrix. "Primitive chemical combustion," he stated flatly. "We abandoned such methods approximately 47,000 years ago when we discovered gravity manipulation. These humans are essentially throwing rocks at the sky and hoping for the best." The chamber erupted in what could generously be called applause but sounded more like a zoo at feeding time. Various appendages waved, proboscis trumpeted, and several species made sounds that definitely weren't in any translation database. "Speak of the primitive," Vorthak announced, his crystalline form shifting colors with what might have been anticipation, "their representative approaches." Through the massive viewing ports, the assembled council watched as a small, unremarkable vessel approached the station. It moved with all the grace of a flying brick, trailing a modest exhaust plume that looked positively quaint compared to the exotic energy signatures of the other ships docked nearby. "Behold," Zorglex announced dramatically, "humanity's finest achievement in space travel. I'm told it runs on refined hydrocarbons and sheer audacity." The docking process was equally unimpressive. No elegant energy coupling, no sophisticated gravitational anchoring, just mechanical clamps and physical connections, like something a child might build with construction toys. "I almost feel sorry for them," Blixnorp commented. "Imagine being so technologically backward that you still rely on Newton's third law for propulsion." The chamber fell silent as the human representative finally arrived. Captain Jake Morrison strode into the council chamber wearing what appeared to be a simple blue uniform, completely unbothered by the hundreds of alien eyes, sensors and other sensory organs focused on him. He looked around the magnificent chamber with the expression of someone who was trying very hard not to be impressed, and failing just slightly. "Gentlemen, ladies and assorted classifications I don't have words for," Jake said, his voice carrying easily through the chamber's acoustic systems. "Thank you for having me. I understand you have some questions about humanity's readiness to join your little club here." The silence stretched for a moment, before Vorthak's harmonic laughter filled the space. "Little club? Oh my dear primitive, you have no idea what you're asking to join." Jake pulled out a small device that looked suspiciously like a tablet computer, completely ignoring the council's amusement. "Right. Well, let me run through humanity's achievements real quick. We've got controlled nuclear fusion for clean energy, artificial intelligence systems that can process quantum calculations, medical technology that can regrow organs, and we've managed to completely eliminate several diseases that plagued us for centuries." Zorglex's scales rippled with what passed for a chuckle. "How adorable. Nuclear fusion. We were splitting atoms when your star was still a nebula. As for artificial intelligence, my personal grooming assistant has more processing power than your entire planet's computer network. And medical technology." Blixnorp's monotone voice dripped with mechanical disdain. "Regrowing organs is kindergarten-level biological manipulation. We've been doing that since before your species discovered agriculture. Next you'll tell us you've learned to make fire without rubbing sticks together." Jake nodded thoughtfully, as if he was taking notes rather than being systematically insulted. "I see. What about our space exploration? We've mapped our entire solar system, established permanent colonies on multiple worlds, and developed deep space communication networks." The chamber filled with various alien expressions of mirth again. Vorthak's crystalline form shifted through several colors that probably meant something extremely condescending. "Mapping a single star system, how quaint. Most species accomplish that before they develop interstellar travel. We have maps of galaxy clusters, young human. But let's talk about your crowning achievement," Zorglex said, rising from his coiled position with theatrical flair. Your propulsion technology. Please, enlighten us about your magnificent chemical rockets. Oh, you mean the explosive propulsion systems? Jake asked innocently. Exactly. Zorglex's tongue flicked out in delight. You literally strap yourselves to controlled explosions and hope for the best. Meanwhile, we manipulate gravity itself, bend space-time, harness zero-point energy fields. We travel between stars as easily as you stumble between your own pathetic planets. Blixnorp activated several holographic displays showing sleek alien vessels that seemed to move without any visible means of propulsion. Observe true engineering elegance. No crude chemical reactions, no wasteful energy conversion, no primitive combustion chambers belching toxic exhaust. We have transcended such barbaric methods. Our ships move through space like thoughts through consciousness. Vorthak added with what sounded like poetry but felt like a lecture. We have achieved perfect harmony between technology and the fundamental forces of the universe. Jake scratched his chin thoughtfully. That does sound pretty impressive. Very elegant. Very refined. Finally, some recognition of your betters, Zorglex preened. But I have to ask, Jake continued. How long did it take your species to develop this elegant gravity manipulation technology? A mere 50,000 years of dedicated research and development, Blixnorp replied proudly. Though admittedly, we had to overcome several technological dead ends along the way. 50,000 years. Wow. Jake looked genuinely impressed. And during all that time, you never thought to just make bigger explosions. The chamber fell silent. Several aliens made sounds that their translators couldn't quite process. Bigger explosions. Vorthak's harmonic voice carried a note of confusion. Yeah, you know, instead of spending 50 millennia figuring out how to tickle gravity just right, did anyone ever suggest maybe just making the boom part boom harder? Zorglex's scales changed color in what was definitely not amusement anymore. That's not how advanced engineering works. Human. Right. Of course not. Jake said quickly. I'm sure your way is much better. Very sophisticated. Very, he paused, seeming to search for the right word, complicated. The council was preparing to move on to the formal rejection of Earth's application when Jake raised his hand. Actually, before you make your decision, would you mind if I gave you a little demonstration, just to show you what human engineering can do? A demonstration of primitive chemical propulsion. Zorglex couldn't hide his delight. Oh, this is too perfect. Yes, by all means, show us your pathetic fireworks display. Excellent, Jake said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. I think you're really going to enjoy this. Jake tapped his tablet and spoke into it with the casual tone of someone ordering coffee. Murphy, you there, buddy? A voice crackled through the device, dripping with synthetic sarcasm that somehow made the AI sound more human than half the biologicals in the room. Oh, I'm here all right, Jake. Just floating in space, surrounded by ships that look like they were designed by committee and built by perfectionist artists. What's the plan, boss? The council would like a demonstration of human propulsion technology. Think you can give them something memorable? Can I give them something memorable? He asks. Murphy's voice took on a theatrical tone. Jake, I've been listening to these pompous gas bags for the last hour through your comlink. Trust me, I've been preparing something special. The aliens exchanged glances, or whatever their species did instead of glancing. Vorthak's crystalline form flickered with curiosity. Your ship has artificial intelligence. Oh yeah, Jake replied casually. Murphy handles most of the technical stuff. He's got a personality though. Fair warning. Personality is a strong word. Murphy interjected. I prefer enhanced operational parameters with attitude. Now Jake, should I move us to a safe distance for the demonstration? Safe distance. Blixnorp's mechanical voice carried a note of confusion. How much energy can a primitive chemical drive possibly produce? Murphy, what do you think? Standard demonstration distance. For this crowd. Oh, I'm thinking we go with Protocol 7. Really give them the full experience. Jake nodded thoughtfully. Protocol 7 it is. Council members, you might want to dim your viewing ports. This could get a little bright. The aliens were now gathering around the massive viewing windows like spectators at some primitive sporting event. Zorglex coiled himself into what passed for a comfortable viewing position. This should be amusing. I haven't seen chemical propulsion since I was a hatchling studying ancient history. Through the transparent barriers, they watched Jake's unremarkable ship begin to move away from the station. It still looked like nothing special. All functional angles and modest proportions. No elegant curves, no exotic energy signatures, just a working vessel that someone had clearly built to get from point A to point B without any unnecessary flourishes. Murphy, run through the startup sequence. And maybe explain what we're doing for our audience. With pleasure, boss. Ladies, gentlemen, and assorted carbon-based life forms, what you're about to witness is the result of humanity's unique approach to engineering problems. See, while you folks spent 50,000 years figuring out how to politely ask gravity to move you around, we took a more direct approach. The ship's exterior began to change subtly. Panels slid back, revealing systems that definitely hadn't been visible during the docking procedure. We looked at the fundamental forces of the universe. Murphy continued conversationally, and we didn't think, how can we work with these forces elegantly? We thought, how can we make these forces do exactly what we want, whether they like it or not? Vorthak's harmonic resonance carried a note of growing unease. What exactly are you powering up out there? Jake glanced at his tablet, where readouts were beginning to climb into ranges that made some of the aliens' translation devices start throwing error messages. Oh, just standard human engineering. You know how it is. If something's worth doing, it's worth overdoing. The interesting thing about humans, Murphy's voice carried through the chamber's speakers with obvious relish, is that we never saw the point in baby steps. Why spend millennia developing elegant solutions when you can just skip straight to the nuclear option? Literally, in some cases. Blixnorp's optical sensors focused on the energy readings his instruments were picking up. Those power levels can't be correct. Your ship is generating energy signatures that should require a vessel 10 times that size. Ah, Jake said with that mysterious smile again. That's the beauty of human engineering philosophy. We don't make our ships bigger to handle more power, we just make our power sources more efficient. Efficient. Zorglex's scales were starting to shift colors in what definitely wasn't amusement anymore. Well, Jake said thoughtfully, I suppose efficient isn't quite the right word. More like, concentrated. Murphy, what's our current power output looking like? We're still in the warm-up phase, boss. Give me another 30 seconds and we'll be ready to show these folks what a real engine looks like. The chamber had gone very quiet except for the various beeping, chirping and buzzing sounds of alien instruments trying to make sense of what they were detecting. You know, Jake said conversationally, humans have always been really good at making things go boom. It's sort of our specialty. All right, Murphy, let's light this candle. Oh, with absolute pleasure, boss. Council members, I'd like to direct your attention to what you've been calling our primitive chemical drive. Now, you're technically correct that it involves controlled explosions, but you might have missed a few important details about exactly what we're exploding. The ship's rear section began to glow with a light that started as a gentle blue and rapidly shifted through the spectrum towards something that made the viewing ports automatically darken to protect the assembled aliens' various optical organs. See, the thing about humans, Murphy continued, his voice taking on the tone of a professor delivering a favorite lecture, is that we don't really do things halfway. When we discovered nuclear fission, we didn't think, oh, what a nice way to generate electricity. We thought, how can we make this explode better? When we figured out fusion, same thing, but then we discovered antimatter. Blixnorp's mechanical voice carried the first note of genuine alarm anyone had heard from him. Antimatter? You mean theoretical exotic matter research? Theoretical, Jake laughed, and it wasn't a particularly comforting sound. Murphy, what percentage of our fuel is antimatter? Well, if we're being technical about it, all of it. We're running on a pure matter-antimatter annihilation drive. 100% mass-to-energy conversion, because why settle for anything less efficient than the fundamental structure of reality allows? The silence in the chamber was the kind of quiet that happens right before someone screams. Vorthak's crystalline form cycled through colors that probably didn't exist in most species' visual spectrums. You're flying around in a controlled annihilation reaction. Controlled is such a relative term, Murphy replied cheerfully. It's more like we've figured out how to make universal destruction work for us instead of against us. Jake, wanna tell them about the fuel storage? Oh, the fuel system's pretty elegant, Jake said, apparently oblivious to the growing panic around him. We keep the matter and antimatter in magnetic containment bottles. If the power fails, they touch, and well, he shrugged. Let's just say we wouldn't need to worry about fuel efficiency anymore. Zorglex's scales had gone completely white, which in his species indicated either extreme cold or absolute terror. You're telling us that your ship is essentially a bomb that you've learned to ride. Bomb is such an ugly word, Jake replied thoughtfully. We prefer to think of it as a controlled universal annihilation event that happens to push us in the direction we want to go. Murphy, show them what happens when we open the throttle. Now this is what I've been waiting for. Murphy's voice practically purred with satisfaction. Engaging full power in 3, 2, 1. The rear of Jake's ship didn't just light up. It opened a hole in space itself, The exhaust wasn't flame or plasma or any form of matter that the aliens' instruments could properly classify. It was raw energy, the fundamental force that held atoms together, being released in a directed stream that made their sophisticated gravity drives look like children's toys. The ship didn't accelerate. It simply existed in one place, and then existed somewhere else, as if the universe had decided that the normal rules of motion were more like suggestions when faced with that much concentrated destruction. Sweet mother of quantum mechanics, Blixnorp whispered, his monotone voice cracking for the first time in recorded history. The energy output is its reading as. His voice died as his instruments gave up trying to measure what they were seeing. Let me put this in perspective for you folks, Murphy announced, clearly enjoying himself immensely. That little demonstration we just did, we converted approximately 1 gram of matter into pure energy. That's about 21 kilotons of TNT equivalent. You know, a nice modest Tuesday morning warm-up. Vorthak's harmonic voice was barely a whisper. 21 kilotons, for propulsion. Oh, that wasn't propulsion, Jake corrected helpfully. That was just us clearing our throat. Murphy, what's our maximum rated output? Well, Jake, our civilian model here is rated for approximately 50 teratons per second maximum burn. That's enough energy to sterilize a small moon, just for reference. The military models are, well, let's just say they're not civilian models. The council chamber had gone dead silent, except for the sound of various alien breathing apparatus working overtime. Ambassador Zorglek slowly uncoiled from his viewing position, his serpentine form trembling slightly. Your entire species travels around the galaxy in ships that could destroy planets. Well, not on purpose, Jake said reasonably. The planet-destroying part is just a side effect. We're really just trying to get places quickly, though I suppose if someone really annoyed us. He trailed off with a shrug that somehow managed to be more terrifying than any threat. Murphy, tell them about the safety record. Oh, the safety record is excellent, Murphy replied proudly. We've only had 3 accidental planetary sterilizations, and 2 of those were uninhabited. Well, mostly uninhabited. The third one was. Well, we don't talk about the third one. Council leader Vorthak's crystalline form was cycling through colors so rapidly it looked like a disco ball having a seizure. This is impossible. No species develops antimatter propulsion as their primary space travel method. It's too dangerous, too unstable, too awesome, Jake suggested helpfully. Look, I get it. You folks took the long way around, spent 50,000 years figuring out how to massage gravity just right. Very impressive, very sophisticated, but humans looked at the universe and thought, you know what, instead of asking nicely for the laws of physics to help us out, let's just threaten them with annihilation until they cooperate. And it works, Murphy added cheerfully. Nothing motivates the fundamental forces of nature quite like the prospect of being converted into pure energy. Murphy, I think our new friends might want to see what this baby can really do. How about a proper demonstration? Oh, now you're speaking my language, boss. Council members, what you witnessed before was approximately 0.001% of our actual capability. Jake, should we show them the Alcubierre modification? Blixnorp's optical sensors were flashing in patterns that his species reserved for existential crises. Alcubierre modification. You've weaponized space-time distortion. Weaponized is such a harsh word, Jake replied, pulling out what appeared to be a thermos and taking a sip of coffee as if he were discussing the weather. We just figured out that if you're already tearing holes in reality with antimatter, you might as well bend space-time while you're at it. 2 birds, 1 stone, you know. Murphy, engage the warp field generators. With absolute pleasure. Now, honored council members, observe what happens when we combine matter-antimatter annihilation with localized space-time manipulation. The ship began to do something that made every alien instrument in the chamber simultaneously have what could only be described as a nervous breakdown. The vessel wasn't moving through space anymore. Space was moving around the vessel. Reality itself was being grabbed by the throat and forced to cooperate with human transportation needs. The energy requirements. Vorthak's harmonic voice was barely audible above the sound of various alien technologies giving up trying to measure what they were seeing. The power needed to distort space-time at that level should require the entire energy output of a star. Well, yeah, if you're doing it the hard way, Jake agreed. But see, that's the difference between your approach and ours. You spent 50,000 years learning to work with the universe. We spent 50 years learning to make the universe work for us. The ship vanished. Not moved, not accelerated, not teleported. It simply ceased to exist in one location and began existing in another several light seconds away as casually as stepping through a doorway. The beautiful thing about antimatter, Murphy's voice continued from speakers throughout the station, apparently unconcerned by the fact that his physical housing had just violated several fundamental laws of physics, is that it provides enough energy to make space-time sit up, roll over, and fetch your slippers. We're not traveling faster than light. We're making light travel slower than us. Zorglex had completely uncoiled and was now sprawled across his platform in what could charitably be called a faint. His scales were cycling through colors that didn't have names in any known language, including his own. "This is impossible," he whispered. "No species develops this kind of technology without destroying themselves first. The energy levels, the containment requirements, the sheer reckless audacity required to even attempt." Well, that's where you're wrong," Jake said, settling back to watch his ship perform maneuvers that were making several aliens question their understanding of basic reality. "See, most species probably would destroy themselves trying to develop this stuff. But humans have one crucial advantage. Which is?" Vorthak managed to ask, his crystalline form flickering weakly. "We're really good at not dying when we probably should." "Murphy, tell them about the test program." "Oh, the test program was fantastic," Murphy replied with audible glee. "We only lost 17 research stations, 34 test pilots and one small asteroid before we figured out the proper containment procedures. Though to be fair, the asteroid was kind of an accident. We were aiming for the test range." 17 research stations, Blixnorp repeated in a mechanical whisper. "Well, they weren't lost so much as converted into their component energy states," Murphy clarified helpfully. "Very educational. Really taught us what not to do next time." The ship reappeared directly in front of the viewing windows, having somehow traveled approximately 12 million kilometers in the time it took Jake to finish his coffee. The casual nature of the feat was somehow more terrifying than the raw power display. "The thing is," Jake continued conversationally, "humans have always had this philosophy that if something's worth doing, it's worth doing dangerously. When we invented cars, we immediately started racing them. When we invented airplanes, we immediately started doing loops. When we split the atom, we immediately started wondering how big we could make the explosion. And when you discovered antimatter," Vorthak asked, though his harmonic voice suggested he already dreaded the answer. "We immediately started wondering if we could use it to power our daily commute," Jake replied with a grin. "Murphy, what's the current status of the civilian antimatter transportation network back on Earth?" "Well, boss, we've got about 47,000 registered antimatter vehicles currently in operation. That includes everything from personal spacecraft to the municipal bus system. Oh, and the pizza delivery fleet. But those are technically commercial vehicles." The silence that followed was the kind of quiet that happens when an entire room full of beings simultaneously realizes they've been catastrophically wrong about something important. "Pizza delivery," Zorglex whispered. "Yeah. Geno's Galactic Pizza promises delivery anywhere in the solar system within 30 minutes or it's free," Jake explained. "Turns out antimatter propulsion is really useful for keeping the cheese from getting cold during interplanetary deliveries. You use planet-killing energy sources to deliver pizza," Vorthak stated, his voice carrying the tone of someone whose worldview was undergoing rapid and unwilling reconstruction. "Well, yeah. I mean, what's the point of having universe-ending technology if you can't use it for practical stuff?" Jake looked genuinely puzzled by their confusion. "Though I should probably mention that this is just our civilian fleet." The chamber went silent again, except for the sound of various alien breathing apparatus and what might have been whimpering. Just the civilian fleet," Blixnorp managed. Jake nodded cheerfully. "Oh yeah, the military uses much better stuff. Can't tell you about that though. Security clearance and all that. But let's just say that if someone were to hypothetically really annoy humanity as a whole, well," he shrugged and took another sip of coffee, "we'd probably have to have a very serious conversation about their continued existence in this particular universe." The transformation in the council chamber was immediate and absolute. Vorthak's crystalline form suddenly blazed with colors that Jake's translation software identified as desperate diplomatic enthusiasm. The ancient being's harmonic voice took on a tone that could only be described as aggressively friendly. "Captain Morrison, what a delightful surprise this has been. I believe there may have been some sort of misunderstanding regarding humanity's application for galactic membership." "Oh, was there?" Jake asked innocently, finishing his coffee and screwing the cap back onto his thermos with the same casual demeanor he'd maintained throughout the entire demonstration. Ambassador Zorglex, who had managed to recoil himself into something resembling a dignified position, was nodding so vigorously his scales were creating a sound like maracas. Yes, a terrible misunderstanding. We were clearly reviewing outdated information about your species' technological capabilities." "Severely outdated," Blixnorp added, his monotone voice now carrying undertones of what sounded suspiciously like panic-induced enthusiasm. Our intelligence-gathering methods are obviously inadequate when it comes to properly assessing civilizations that have mastered controlled annihilation as a transportation method. Jake looked around the chamber at the assembled aliens, all of whom were now leaning forward with expressions that ranged from desperate friendliness to barely contained terror. So you're saying humanity's application for membership is approved? Approved. Vorthak's harmonic laughter had a distinctly hysterical edge. My dear Captain, humanity's membership is not just approved, it's enthusiastically endorsed. In fact, we'd like to offer you a position on the Council's Executive Committee, and full access to our technology databases. Zorglex added quickly. Not that you seem to need any of our our different technological approaches. We should discuss establishing formal diplomatic relations immediately, Blixnorp contributed, his optical sensors flashing in patterns that suggested he was thinking very fast. Perhaps we could arrange for cultural exchange programs, technology sharing agreements, mutual defense treaties. Jake raised an eyebrow. Mutual defense, that's interesting. What exactly would humanity be defending against? The aliens exchanged glances that somehow managed to convey entire conversations in the span of seconds. Vorthak's form flickered through what Jake's translator helpfully identified as diplomatic evasion colors. Oh, you know, the usual galactic threats. Rogue asteroids, solar flares, the occasional interdimensional incursion. Nothing that would require the use of, say, planet-sterilizing levels of directed energy or reality warping capabilities. Murphy, Jake said casually, are you getting all this? Oh, I'm recording everything, boss. Though I have to say, the sudden shift in attitude is fascinating from a sociological perspective. It's amazing how quickly primitive explosives become advanced annihilation technologies when you demonstrate proper application. Indeed, Jake agreed. So Council members, let me make sure I understand the situation. An hour ago, humanity was too primitive to join your galactic community. Now, we're being offered executive positions and defense contracts. Times change, Zorglex said with forced cheerfulness. Perspectives evolve. First impressions can be so misleading, especially when those first impressions involve underestimating a species that has weaponized the fundamental forces of reality for convenience purposes. Vorthak added, his harmonic voice carefully modulated to sound admiring rather than terrified. Jake nodded thoughtfully. Well, I suppose we could consider membership. Though I should probably mention that we've got several other ships en route to this sector. The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop several degrees. Other ships? Blixnorp asked carefully. Oh yeah, routine patrol stuff. Nothing major, just a small fleet of our latest civilian models coming to check out the neighborhood. Should be here in about. Jake glanced at his tablet. 6 hours or so. How many ships? Vorthak's question came out as barely a whisper. Let's see. Murphy, what's the count on the Sol System diplomatic survey fleet? Well, Jake, we've got 12 heavy cruisers, 37 medium transports, and 83 light patrol craft. Plus the usual support vessels. Oh, and Captain Rodriguez is bringing her entire pizza delivery squadron as a goodwill gesture. She figured the council might be hungry after long diplomatic sessions. The silence that followed was profound. It was the kind of silence that happens when an entire room full of beings simultaneously realizes that they are about to be visited by over 100 ships, each one powered by controlled universal annihilation and operated by a species that considers reality warping technologies suitable for food delivery. Pizza delivery squadron, Zorglex repeated weakly. 24 ships, Murphy added helpfully. Captain Rodriguez takes customer service very seriously. She's never missed a delivery deadline, even when it required creative applications of space-time manipulation. This is wonderful news. Vorthak's enthusiasm was so forced it was practically radioactive. We should prepare a proper welcome ceremony. Alert all member species. Organize cultural exhibitions. Perhaps we should also draft some preliminary agreements regarding territorial boundaries and mutual non-aggression protocols. That's very thoughtful of you, Jake said, standing up and brushing imaginary dust off his uniform. I'll let them know you're rolling out the red carpet. Though you might want to mention to your member species that our ships occasionally cause minor spatial distortions when they drop out of warp. Nothing dangerous, just some temporary gravitational anomalies and the occasional aurora effect. We'll be sure to warn everyone. Blixnorp managed. Jake headed toward the chamber's exit, then paused and turned back. Oh, one more thing. The folks back home are pretty excited about meeting new species. They're planning to send some of our anthropologists and cultural specialists along with the next diplomatic mission. That sounds educational, Vorthak said cautiously. Oh, it will be. Especially since they'll be arriving in our new experimental vessels. The ones that run on controlled black hole manipulation. Still working out some bugs in the system, but the fuel efficiency is incredible. The sound that emerged from the council chamber as Jake walked away could best be described as the collective realization of an entire galactic civilization that they had spent the last hour insulting a species that had turned cosmic destruction into a public transportation system. Murphy, Jake said as he headed back to his ship, remind me to send a thank you note to the council for their warm welcome. Already drafted, boss. I took the liberty of mentioning that humanity looks forward to a long and peaceful relationship with our new galactic neighbors. I may have emphasized the peaceful part several times. Good thinking. And Murphy, yeah boss. Next time someone calls our engineering primitive, maybe we should just start with the antimatter demonstration. Save everyone some time. Noted. Though I have to say, the look on their faces when they realized we deliver pizza with reality warping technology was absolutely priceless. Jake grinned as he climbed aboard his ship, leaving behind a council chamber full of aliens who were frantically trying to figure out how to diplomatically welcome a species that had somehow made the universe itself into their personal taxi service. Sometimes, he reflected, it was good to be human. After all, if you're going to make a first impression, you might as well make it an explosive one.